So for today, it's so inspiring that we have a Women Who Empower event to be able to hear from some innovative trailblazers within their industries, their stories, and their inspiring encouragements for us to take away today. I'm going to very quickly pass on to our panel moderator today, to Jennica Palecek. And I want to say a little bit about Jennica, but my phone decided to go to sleep before I do that, and then I lost it. Jennica, yeah, I'm going to just riff on it now then because I've lost my notes on you. Sorry about that. Jennica is managing executive. What's your role with Colliers?
I'm a commercial real estate advisor with Colliers International, and we've had the absolute pleasure of being a real estate partner with Northeastern University and now leading a few of these clients.
And you're a senior associate. That's the word I was looking for.
Yes, I help businesses with their real estate, and then also I'm a vice president for our women's council.
And has a long history of supporting women within the industry of real estate. I think you mentioned that there are 5 women in your field at your level.
5 women, yes. So hopefully
across Canada,
in Vancouver.
In Vancouver. And also has done a lot of work to help people start up their businesses, grow their businesses through real estate in New York and Brazil, and now here in Vancouver, correct?
Yes, yeah. In New York, I was able to lead a program that supported minority female founders, over 300 of them scaling their businesses.
Fantastic. So you're in for a great panel moderated by a woman leader who understands how important it is to find your people, lift each other up, and lean in. So take it away, Jennica, introducing our panel. Thank you.
And thank you. I'm very excited to be here, and even more excited as well to introduce these incredible panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Women Who Empower panel. We are joined by 2 incredible leaders who have not only made extraordinary strides in their career, but have also taken bold risks and transitions, as well as built frameworks that have shaped their success. Today, we'll explore their unique journeys, the lessons they've learned along the way, and the advice they have for anyone who may be looking to carve their own path or make transitions. We will be learning a lot about them, but before we start, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Raise hands. Who would describe themselves as having any managerial experience or potentially leading a team or any leadership type of experience? Amazing. And who here would describe themselves as having any entrepreneurial experience or maybe being an entrepreneur currently? Amazing, incredible. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for that. To kick things off, I'd love to talk about something that's on many of our minds: balance. Both of you have held demanding leadership roles that require serious time and focus. What are the systems, habits, or boundaries that you've put in place to be able to sustain high performance at work while also finding fulfillment in your personal life? And perhaps most importantly, what are some of your non-negotiables for this?
How is everyone today? Good? Great. Okay. I love this question because it is a life question to me. It's, career fits into that, but so it's also about personal. So I grew my career through sales, and when I was younger, I think for the most part, I was just pretty heads down, working in a tech company, trying to build out my skill set, trying to, keep pace, understand how to lead a team. And then I decided to have a baby. So having children or having a child for me was a bit of a wake-up call in the sense of my time was no longer my own. So I had to start thinking about time a bit differently, thinking about quality versus quantity. And one of the things that I was lucky enough to stumble across was to do the work. And so what I mean by that is I really had to sit down and do an annual assessment of my life. So I would sit down and I would, kind of develop my values, assess my guiding principles for the year, what that meant. I would also look at, I don't know if anyone knows what a wheel of life is, sort of a circular, I see some head shaking. So it's a circle that has all aspects of your life in it, like work, fitness, health, children, all those things. So I started to sit down and do those assessments. And I would today, I even do them every January. I sit down and I start to write these out beginning of January, and it tends to take about 4 weeks to do so. And I walk away and I look back at my framework for the year, right? Then I get into my year, right? And as we know, things start to kind of happen, right? And you think, oh, wow, I haven't worked out all week. That's really important to me. Something you can sit back and look at, your assessment for the year and say, was that important to me? Yes, it was. Why am I not doing it? So the point of the assessment is to have a macro framework and plan for your year so that as you're in it, it keeps you honest, right? So within sort of day-to-day things, for me, some of the examples that work best would be things like time blocking, right? Making a plan for yourself. So again, block out time to exercise. If it's important to be outside all day, then maybe I would take meetings outside. I would do a phone call, go for a walk. If it was an in-person meeting, I would walk. Those types of things sort of from a macro level and then a micro level on a day-to-day sort of really helped keep me balanced and, honest. I would also kind of come back to having the child in the sense of something that really forced me to have non-negotiables. So, my daughter, Chloe, my partner and I, we both worked. So I worked hard all day. And then when I came home, I would put work away. So my non-negotiable for my daughter was I'll work as smart and as hard as I can during the day, between the hours of 5 and 8, no work's going to happen. And I learned that lesson the hard way because I was like holding my baby, trying to, type away and do work. I was like, this is ridiculous. She's not getting anything out of this. I'm not getting anything out of this. So, I learned quickly because she was a top priority. When you have a top priority, you tend to work harder on kind of setting and creating your boundaries. So that was a good, for me, a good area of setting a hard boundary. And then the last thing I would say is that my other boundary is I always have had a special ringtone for my daughter. And I've always said to her, yeah, mom works, but you call, I will answer. And that was something that I always didn't matter what meeting I was in. If I heard that ring, I would leave the meeting, pick up the phone and answer it. And that was something that was a commitment that was really important to me. And, if you set your expectations, help people understand that this might happen, then it all works out.
Riff off that a little bit. And I may not be as planful as Felicia in that way. I probably learned the hard way on setting boundaries. It also started with children. I was on mat leave and got asked to come back to work for a meeting. And I was nursing at the time. I said, yeah, sure, I'll come back for the meeting, but I'm bringing the baby. And if the baby is hungry, he needs to eat. Fortunately, I had people around me that accepted that, encouraged it, and embraced it. Not everybody always has that, but it gave me the confidence, again, to continue setting those boundaries. So as the kids grew up, it was a similar thing. The ringtone, making the time for the kids, and prioritizing. But I was also in a fortunate position because I had a lot of colleagues that didn't have children, and you can see that they didn't have the easy way to set boundaries. Young people in your life are a really easy way to stay focused because it is a non-negotiable person. And it may also be someone else in your life that needs you in the same way. But encourage everybody, if you don't have something like that or someone like that, find what it is for you. As the children have grown older, those boundaries have become more flexible for me. And the next one that was sort of imposed on me was a bit of burnout. And then you realize, hang on, I can't do this forever. My non-negotiable now is I walk the dogs early in the morning. Again, there's non-negotiables, they have to walk. But it's my time, it's my quiet time. Nobody gets to interfere with that. So as much as I may have to do during the day or exert energy, if I don't get that quiet time, I don't feel balanced. So going back to the balance and trying to like, everybody's got something different. And it's easy if you can figure out what that is before something comes and sort of knocks you over the head with that.
You, Cynthia and Felicia. Another question for the audience. We're about to talk about some transitions and career moves. Is there anyone in the audience who can show with hands who may be in the position of making a career transition currently? Amazing. This is exciting. So Felicia here she started in sales. She was the CEO of Unbounce, and now she leads other entrepreneurs as entrepreneur in residence with Inovia Capital. She's transitioned and done it, in my opinion, more than incredibly well. Felicia, when you're making those transitions, they're scary. I'm sure there's uncertainty. How do you test the waters? And how do you know that it's time to go to the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could tag team on this because we were talking about this earlier at lunch. In my experience, there has been two things that happen. One, you want to move and you've been planning on it, right? Like it's in your strategy and you've been doing the work, right? And, your network around your professional network who's supporting you, ideally they know this is like your plan, right? Like, so it's an intentional transition, right? And if you do that well I think I have done it really well because part of who I am is to be a planner. And part of my own philosophy is to truly understand sort of who you are, meaning who I am, what my strengths are, what I'm good at. And again, how I have figured that out is I've done the work. So transitions in that situation can be easy. So if you have a planned transition, you're in control of it, right? And you've done the work. Maybe you've used strengths finders to help figure that out. Maybe you've used something like Discovery Insights to help kind of, go deeper into that. You have maybe used a coach, right? You're finding out like, do I want to go, keep this sales job, but now I want to move into leadership. Like, do I need to be in this company? Should I be moving to that company? How important is dollars to me? Like those types of things. So intentional transitions should actually be fun, right? Like scary, like because any change is scary, but they should be planned and you should be in the driver's seat, right? And you've got a group who's supporting you to drive through. The other one is you're just stuck in this myopic fishbowl, which we talked about earlier. We want to talk a little bit about that and we can tag team on it.
For sure. At lunch, we were talking about sometimes you can see it in someone else that they should move because you can just see they're not happy. They're not bringing the energy that you'd seen in them before. there's just something. I mean, we're humans, we're intuitive. You pick up on things without somebody actually saying something to you. And how do you help that person move along to the next point? Because you also don't want to come out and just say blank.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I have found, because I've been in that situation where I'm just like heads down, like it's all the job. I'm like tired. I'm just getting up. I'm going to work. And, you wake up 5 days in a row and you're just like rolling your eyes, right? You're just like, it's really hard. Yes, we all have hard weeks, but if that lasts for like 4 weeks, you have to pay attention to what is happening. And if all your tricks aren't working, like, I should block out some time and do this and go. If it's week 2 and you're still waking up, if it's week 3, you're still waking up. It's week 4, you're still waking up and you're unhappy. You have to ask yourself what is going on, right? And you know who, for me, like we all have these people in our lives. A lot of them are some of your closest people in your network. All of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like, why has Sheila been asking me last week, the week before that? Like, how are you? What's going on with you? Right? Like, your friends, your close friends will know before you, right? And because they watch you, your energy is low, right? You're dragging it along. These are all signs, right? These are all really good signs, right? And again, like it's think sometimes when we're feeling pretty low, and I call that being below the line, right? We all are below the line. Something really bad happens to us, we end up below the line. It's okay to be below the line, and it's okay to have those 4 weeks. It's okay if it turns into, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. But at some point, you got to sort of say, I'm done being there. Like, this is not the life I want to be living. And then, again, you are now in a place where you can take control of pushing that transition. If you put your mind to it and do the work, you can have a really good strategic plan that aligns with who you are, your values, what you want to be doing. And then it's just still scary, still scary, but it's much easier to move and with a lot higher level of confidence.
That sort of goes back to this ownership. The only person that can own your journey is you yourself. And the moment you sort of end up in that victim mindset, it's generally the lower energy, the something. When you can shift that and take back control, even if it's one step at a time, you'll feel more empowered, energized, and be able to make the reach outs that you need to make out as you move forward.
One of the things I look back and think about is like the level of responsibility that I had along my career journey and how much that level allowed me to transition faster or slower. So maybe let me explain a little bit. My advice is when you're young and you have fairly low set of responsibility. And what I mean by this is like, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have, kids, you don't have like all the things that in a funny way that we strive to have, because that is a bit of life. When you don't have those things, you should take, in my opinion, as many risks as you can, right? Because somebody said this, I was listening to a podcast, I can't claim this to be my own, but they said, you have less to lose than you think. So when you have a low level of like real hardcore life responsibilities, go, like make change, transition, like jump, try stuff. Because, things may work out, they may not work out, but here's what you do know is that you'll get a lot of experience, right? But mid-career, late career, if, I have a family I'm raising, my daughter's in school here, I've got a mortgage, all the things. you can't move as fast. You can still move, but you're just gotta weigh your responsibilities. So it's a bit of an arc. And of course, then, when you get to where I am today, I now weirdly have a ton of flexibility, right? So it's a funny arc, right? As you think about your career. But it's just something to contemplate. The younger you are, in my opinion, and the less responsibility you have, move through your transitions as fast as you want to, right? And, sometimes that means going to a company for a year, leaving. Sometimes that means going for 6 months, leaving. Sometimes that means like, let me go try to live someplace else and learn that, right? But you can embrace that because it's a great opportunity to do so.
Equated to say is sometimes you just have to say yes.
Yeah.
If you look at my resume early on in my career, I think it's got a whole bunch of job hops, changes, and all of that. It was me searching for what fulfillment meant to me was one of the things, but also I'm wired and I enjoy learning. So that continuous learning and need for a challenge. What I learned later on, maybe not that very early part of my career, is I can actually do that within an organization by just putting my hand up for stretch projects and being a little bit bolder when I saw something not quite right, taking it on, but not being scared to say, this is what I see and this is how I'm going to change it or fix it or get involved or whatever the context is. Sometimes it's not always broken, it's just done just a little bit differently and then helped in a different way. It may be a revenue opportunity, it may be an efficiency thing, might be a new technology. Maybe it's just somebody hates the napkins that they're bringing into the kitchen. It can be small, it can be big. Going back to the saying yes, go from saying yes sometimes to pushing it, and you'll find that the confidence grows.
Amazing. And keeping on the track of transition, Synthia, you've also made really incredible transitions. You were an accountant in South Africa. You moved to Vancouver, held C-suite roles in legal and tech. You're now the COO of Clark Wilson. I think that a lot of people who may have been in that position, similar to you, can often sometimes feel paralyzed from making those big career jumps, especially if you're leading countries, let alone continents, and then also industries along with it as well. What kind of doubts did you encounter when you were making these leaps? And to anyone in the audience who might be in a transition period, maybe a little bit nervous or in their head, what kind of advice would you give to them?
It's terrifying. Acknowledge it. I'm gonna say enjoy it. That sounds really, really weird. I know. But I guess what I mean by enjoy it is actually feel it, because you have to, as a human being, allow yourself to feel some of those feelings so that you can process them and then move forward into, again, sort of that positive headspace so that you can move out of the victim of this is happening to me. Don't stay there too long. Work with what I like to say your board of directors. If anybody knows what that means, it's those people in your life that can help lift you up or shine a mirror to you and question you in ways that maybe your family can't. We all have them. You may have fellow students, you may have people back home, faculty. There are different people. You may not identify them as those people in your life right now. So first of all, acknowledging it's terrifying. Take back control where you can. I started off by saying I'm not as deliberate and planful, but have an annual plan and sit down with a wheel of life. I've also been told that I may not see myself as somebody who's very planful in that context, but others see it in me. The way I do it is just different. When I moved from an accounting role into a technology role, At first, it may not have been a deliberate role, but it was one of those opportunities where I saw something that wasn't quite working right. Anybody that were accountants in this room at some point in their life? The last time I was here, there was actually somebody that was moving from CPA into technology. So we had lots to talk about. So my example won't necessarily resonate with you, but accountants have to account for anything that happens in the business. And I came at from the angle of every month I was having to deal with the same problem. It's literally the system that's throwing out the same journal entries. Like there must be a way to fix this. I learned how to configure the system just by trying to troubleshoot. And that's where I learned I had the knack for technology, or at least configuring systems to do what I wanted them to do and not have the interface breakdown. Just that curiosity sparked a whole transition into technology implementations of ERP or enterprise resource planning systems. But some of that's dated, but lots more modern fun tools, but it sparked a very different interest. With that, I was able to come to Canada as not just another accountant, but I had the accounting and the technology in my tool belt, which put me very much in the niche between business and the technology team. So I always say there's a niche for everybody. The role and the title may not be exactly where you fit, but we all bring superpowers to roles. As I moved out of that role, a lot of it, you learn a lot about business being in I'll say a problem-solving technology role, because there's always something going on, or you're trying to innovate or grow or really something different. It was a perfect springboard into a senior leadership role. I moved into that role very deliberately, and I've been an accountant. Accountants are pretty compliant human beings. So implementing systems for accountants is actually pretty easy. Then I moved into implementing CRMs with real estate brokers. Salespeople are not so compliant. They don't really want to follow the rules that we expect them to do in the systems. My next challenge is I wanted to work amongst leadership to help affect the change on the human side. So not just the systems or the process side. And that's what got me into executive leadership. That's where I met Jennica. And through all of that time, I've never lost that love for also technology. In any role you take on in any organization these days, it's something that serves you well. I'm grateful for the accounting background, the technology, and then the piece of helping adapt that to people. So it sounds like a really weird journey, but when you, or at least when I reflect back on what's important to me, continuous learning, always needing a challenge in life, that is what's informed pretty much every move I've ever made. So, stay true to yourself in that. Sometimes you may have to humble pie or do things that don't feel like they're energy up. You may find something in that lesson that you learn that sets you up for the next thing. I'm going to go back to COVID for a second. I got to lead the COVID task force for Colliers, Canada, right at the beginning when lockdown happened. I hated that. It was horrible. None of us were having fun at the time, but I learned a lot. And reflect on that now and say, those are the lessons I learned at the time. So there's always some.
Thank you, Synthia. You guys have both taken very big, bold risks as well. You know, aside from transition, also career-wise. Felicia, you played a key role at Active Network, growing it to over 400 million, and then leading and scaling Unbounce. And then Synthia, you've also stepped into leadership roles in new industries and moved. Felicia, in scaling Unbounce, that was a bold step, and I'm sure that there was a few risks along the way. Can you share a moment that you knew that you were taking a massive risk and how you found the confidence to take that move during that?
So Unbounce is right across the street. Who's familiar with Unbounce? Yeah, totally awesome company. I was thinking, we obviously talked beforehand and we were just chatting through these questions and I was thinking a lot about this and I thought, should I come and tell you like the big business risks I took, or should I tell you sort of the personal risks that I took? And I decided to talk about the latter. So I hope it gives you some insights. Since we're talking about career, as you probably have already picked up, I pretty much approach things. So I have this like concept of like how you do anything is how you do everything. Has anybody heard of that? Right? Saying, yeah, you just have a natural way of doing things. So I've always been like, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go after that. And I'm going to go after that. True salesperson, background of a athlete, right? All that, right? So you can kind of get the picture. And I would say almost every role that I've had in my career, except for one, I've gone after, right? And so I've always been, there's a difference between doing your job and managing your career, right? You got to do your job, but not to the point where it's taking over, like getting to that next step and asking for what you want and lining yourself up. It's unusual because taking the CEO role at Unbounce was not something that I went after. Right. So it was a really unique situation that the company was in. They were going through a massive transition of bringing in a private equity firm who is going to become majority owned. And so and the founders were looking for a little bit more flexibility after building this awesome company. So the company was in this huge transition and they came to me and asked me to take on the CEO role. And I've, been years in senior level roles. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is like a massively huge risk, right? Like, of course you have like all the doubts. You're like, why are you coming to me? Right? Like, right. That's always like, and you're like, wait a second, right? Let me just reframe that and think about that differently. And the risk for me was not at all about, can I actually do the job of creating business health in this company, leading, team members. I had done all this, right? Like, so that wasn't what was scary. What was scary to me was picking this role where I had to be out front and center. And I didn't like that. I mean, I'm sort of like half introvert, half extrovert when needed, which is why I love how nice and small this is, because it's like feels like I'm just talking to friends. That's really helpful. And I thought, oh my God, like I'm gonna have to put myself out there, and that is like it's very uncomfortable. Because here's the deal. And one day when all of you become CEOs, if that's what you want to do, and you're all running your own companies, you are about being behind the team, right? And letting the team move forward. The team, if you're a good leader, your team's taking credit for everything good that is happening. That is the right thing. But when things go bad, the only person that needs to step forward is you, right? And as taking on a CEO role, you're not really on anybody's team, because everyone's reporting to you. You're kind of on that team, but not really. You're certainly not on the investors team, but you're kind of on that team, but not really. You're not a founder, so you're not on that team, right? And so these aspects for someone like me, who I don't love being front and center, right? However, kind of want to win. So like you can't avoid that. So you kind of, so, for me, I would say taking that CEO role was one of the biggest career risks that I had to take, because I needed to dig pretty deep in myself to be able to be out in front representing a brand. Lucky for me, I love that brand. I love what the founders built. I love the culture. So that was really easy to push. But I would say that I didn't know what was going to be different. I just knew a lot of things were going to be different. And that is a super uncomfortable feeling, right? To be like just exposed, right? And at the same time, the reality is we all know this. Sometimes the biggest risks that you take, like the more uncomfortable you feel, the more you learn, right? And I would say absolutely hands down, I learned things that I never thought this late in my career that I would understand, right? And so I would like that was probably my biggest career risk, right? And yeah, along with all the other things that you know, take risks and making decisions and spending money and, that don't always work out. But I would say like career wise, that probably was a huge risk for me.
So thank you for sharing that, Felicia. Cynthia, you've also, you're very involved in the community. For those who don't know, Cynthia also mentors many young professionals through Mosaic, in particular, a lot of newcomers to Canada, which is incredibly exciting. Through your mentorship experience, I'm sure you've seen a lot of young professionals take many risks. What do you think is the first step in helping someone build the confidence they need to take these risks?
I find myself very often, especially working with people new to the country, is let's just talk through things out. And once we've talked through things, bounced a couple of ideas around, and especially like, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And you just navigating that path helps build the confidence of what the next step is, or who else to reach out to, and help sort of create that network. That's why I find a lot of time being spent with I'm just one person. Often person that I'm working with has got somebody that they haven't even thought to reach out to in the network, or even if any of you know Mosaic, there's a lot of support there and opportunities to reach out and connect with people in very similar situations, because they may have learned a lesson that they can impart or share with you as well through that. I think that's where I see people navigating the risk the most successfully. The other thing, and I think it's in the questions later, but I'm going to mention it now, is opportunities to get involved and volunteer for different things. If it's in the community, or if it's an area that you're really passionate and interested in pursuing, because you never know who you're going to connect. It can be I can't even think of an example right now, but the amazing people that I have met through just volunteer opportunities. And it takes time, but it's really, really good.
Cynthia, do you want to add to it?
I can say that. I think the whole concept of like anything, right? You want to be risky, right? Like, right? You just kind of want to like go for it. So anything's a risk. So the real question is like, how do you mitigate that risk? Even just going back to my CEO example and kind of working off of what you said, it reminded me, I get this whole idea. So of course I sat down, I built my lists and I was like, okay, what are you worried about? Like, what don't you know? Right. And I was like, okay, here's my list. What is it that I need to help mitigate this? Right. So I went out, got myself an executive coach. I joined like a CEO forum. It's like I don't know, maybe those people will know, right? Like I just started building this like little ecosystem around me, right? Because that's how it works. I'd always have this saying at work, and is that you don't do anything great on your own. I think Obama probably said that, and but you don't, right? Like you can do some pretty cool stuff, right? But you don't do anything great on your own. Like when you have a group of people around you and you're even here, this is what you're doing. You're like, I don't know, if you take one thing away from today, then this was a really great use of your time, right? So, like how do you mitigate risk? How do you do that? So it's like build a network of people, make time to connect with those people. And because when you do that, then you create trust. And when you create trust, you can sit down and you can talk to anybody about any of it. Sometimes you might just need somebody to listen and you walk away. I don't need advice. I just need someone to listen today. Right. Other times you're like, I got this big problem. I don't want to figure it out. Can you help me figure it out? Right. What's the worst thing that we say is going to happen? Someone will say no. But what if you never asked? Right. So I love this, like build the network around you. And then you work that network. It's not just to support you. You have to want to go get a new job. Great. What do you guys think? Where should I go? Do you have people who I can talk to? You work your network, right? Because they're going to ask you for something as well, right? So build it the way you feel comfortable building it, but build it. Like have your little micro world for your career, right?
Back to the board of directors kind of idea. And you're the first time somebody said to me, go to your board of directors. What on earth are you talking about? I'm a human being, And as they explained it, I thought, actually, I do have people. Like there's somebody whenever I am feeling down that I need that pick me up. I go to that person. And then one day I said to that person, you're my pick me up person. And he said, oh, it's because you always call me out on that stuff that's dragging me down, that is all in my head that I'm ruminating on.
Yeah, and I love the mention of volunteer opportunities as well. I know something you're really involved with Board of Trade, and that's been, I don't know if anyone's gone to any of the events there, but it's always great to connect with other people in the community there and tons of business leaders.
I'm just going to add that we didn't necessarily say, but sometimes you just need to ask for help. People are very keen to actually help or have a conversation. And it's that first step of asking for help, asking the question,
Especially students. I noticed that people would always say that you get better responses when you're a student. And let me tell you, after graduating, that is 100% true. Felicia, we talked about your career from sales to CEO, and now you're guiding other entrepreneurs. So, and you talked a little bit about being a planner, but then the CEO coming up a little bit spontaneously. So really curious to hear this. For your career, for the progression, did you create a specific framework around it and plan your career progression, or did you seize opportunities as they come and pivot based on what was needed?
Yeah. How many people in the room think I planned it? Right. So here, the reality is like I grew up playing team sports, right? And I think a lot of times it's good to think about your youth and it's good to think about what you've learned, right? And so I grew up playing team sports and I was a bit of a shy kid, but I loved sports, right? And I really wanted to be out on the field, right? And in order to get starting position, you had to practice, you had to work, you had to come up with a plan, find people that help develop your skills, right? And then, you get out there and you fail at some stuff, and sometimes you win the game, sometimes you lose the game, right? I think everyone knows how that experience goes. And so I think that taught me a lot. And I am a planner. I do think you have to have a vision in mind of what you want for your life. I do think you have to, navigate and build strategy, right? And because if you have a direction and focus, you can cut down a lot of the noise. Because here's what the reality is, and when we're living it today, there's a lot of noise, right? Like we've got a political environment that never seen before. Each one of us is probably facing something because of that, right? And things can get overwhelming. You could start to attach yourself to the macro level. And, for some of us, there's parts of that that come into our day-to-day lives for sure. And we have to be careful of that. But, I think that you just have to build like your smaller ecosystem around you, right? And it's like this. It's like, here's your small ecosystem. That's the close people we talked about. That's, who you rely on, who you're going to learn from, who you're going to listen from. And there's this like second outer circle that maybe that's like your community here at Northeastern. Maybe that is the, your coworkers, right? So there's that environment. And there's another circle that starts to be like maybe the industry you work in. And then there's that macro political, right? The farther out it is, do you need to be aware of that? Absolutely. But getting sort of myopic and remembering that you can make a plan and take action on that plan every day. And if you're getting knocked down and figuring like you hit a wall there, then you can just turn, your job is to turn around and try to find another path, right? I truly believe that, right? Because we can get stuck, right? And I think we've already said this. It's only up to you, like you control that. So I am definitely a planner, and I'm a person who likes to move forward and who has created really good tools to reframe situations or look at them in a different way. And I think that is a good lesson in life and in career.
We had talked about this. This wasn't in the questions, but I think it might be interesting for the audience and a little bit of a shameless plug for Northeastern. But you obviously were an alumni. You went through the co-op program and you had shared a little bit about when we were on our call about how it helped you figure out which industries connected with, which ones you didn't, and the value of that in your career. Are you able to share with the students how this impacted your trajectory?
Steve's back there. He's like smiling. I'm like, go Huskies, go Huskies. Woo-hoo! Yeah, so I went to Northeastern University. I really wanted to be in Boston. I grew up in New Jersey, and I wasn't really a traditional learner, to be honest, in high school. And I was kind of a mediocre student. And so, sometimes luck comes your way. Like you'll hear this, luck just will drop. And I got really lucky when I decided to apply to Northeastern University. And why I got lucky is because the program was a 5-year program. And so the first year, you go to school, come home for the summer, and then for 4 years, you do half work and, half school. And Northeastern provided me with a couple opportunities. One, it provided me with an opportunity to say, hey, I want to go do this, right? I want to go work in finance. That was like my first idea. And what happened is I went and I worked in finance for 6 months as a co-op student. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's not good, right? Then this happened to me over and over. So one of the things that Northeastern did was help me understand what I didn't want to do, which sounds kind of funny. But every time that happened, I started figuring out what I did want to do and what I liked. And all of the work experience was incredibly critical because by the time you were graduated and you were going after your first job, you actually knew how to operate and be inside of an organization. And the other thing that Northeastern did, and I went into the business school, is that we did a lot of work around, I'm assuming this is still the case, but we did a lot of work around like HBR, Harvard Business Review analysis. So you got like out of the textbooks into analyzing real world, right? And that changed my entire ability of being successful, not only in school, but in a work environment, because in a work environment, there is no textbook, right? Things are changing, things are happening. And so I am forever grateful and feel really lucky that I went to Northeastern. And if you know if you haven't tried the co-op part of the program, I highly recommend it. And I know a lot of people that I was with rolled right in from their co-ops right into roles, right? But again, for me, my experience was it really helped me figure out what I didn't want to do, even though I thought I wanted to do it.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing that. Cynthia, two questions for you as well around transitioning. So as someone who's transitioned across different industries, from accounting and legal and tech, and who's now risen to C-suite roles, I'm curious, did you always have a clear framework for your career progression, or did you find that you adjusted and adapted as you learned more about yourself? And then second follow-on would be, how important did you find reflection and reassessment important in making those decisions?
Some tough questions there. Knowing what you enjoy and then also sort of getting that feedback by doing and trying. Like, got to try everything. Going back to my say yes, maybe that's the way I also eliminated things in my life that I don't enjoy doing. One of the biggest reasons why I left the accounting part of my career is, you know how boring it gets when you live your life around month ends and quarter ends, and on day 2, these 10 journal entries need to happen. And that was one of those realizations, like, this is cool. I've learned a lot. I can't see myself doing this forever. What else? And what transferable skills do you have? Yes, sure, it sort of fell into my lap in a way, and it was just an opportunity to say yes again, to try systems and configuring stuff. That again was one of those opportunities. I tried it. I loved it. I found that I was good with it. Within sort of 2 weeks. So it was positive reinforcement again from people that had been doing it for a long time. At that time, I didn't realize it's actually proactively seeking feedback. It's not something that I grew up with, which I think today is a lot more acceptable, is asking people for feedback. So ask, and if they don't give you feedback because they grew up in a situation like I did, where they, like, I still sometimes struggle to remember to give people feedback. So I need the nudge. Keep nudging. And if the feedback's not good enough or not clear enough, ask them to clarify. But I think that's sort of what the second part was a little bit more nuanced there.
And then I guess about how important reflection and reassessment. Yeah.
The feedback loop definitely gives you an opportunity to reflect very often. Sometimes the feedback hurts. And you've got to kind of take yourself out of that situation at the time. Like, I mean, I also said earlier today, you've got to feel and acknowledge your feelings and process them, because otherwise you're going to hang on to them forever and it's going to hurt you in another way. Create the space afterwards to reflect in a way that works for you. If it's speak it out with a coach, and it may not be a formal coach, it may just be a friend or someone else. That's a way of somebody sort of putting the mirror up to you in a friendly, kind way. They can give you different suggestions. One thing that I certainly learned is spending a lot of time in my head, and that's not always a healthy thing to do either, because you only get your own feedback and thoughts, whereas if you actually speak to somebody that knows the situation or has got some objective view, you get a completely different opinion. Which is why I'm such a strong believer in diversity of thought in all aspects is never ever a bad idea. Sometimes it feel like a bad idea because it feels personal. We all have ways to cope with them and practice those muscles because it gets easy. Thank you, Synthia. Felicia, do you want to add anything to that?
And then before we go on to Q&A, just final question for you both as we wrap up. What's one piece of wisdom that you would share with any young person here, something that they can carry with them in their own careers as they begin to build their futures?
One thing, fail fast, fail forward, and learn. That might be three things, but it's one theme.
Yeah, I can't just say one thing. I was thinking about this and I was like, reminded me of my dad. So another growing up story. So my dad and I used to play a lot of chess together. That was like our, right? Like we would sit down and play chess. And, as life progressed, I thought, oh man, like life is just like one big chess game, right? It's like, right? Yeah. It's like this strategy, like you have your board, this is your life. And, chess is like about moving things forward. It's like about moving everything forward that is important to you. And sometimes, you've got to move a piece back or rely on other people in your network, but it's really about moving forward, right? Because you're like, I believe, like it's hard to be a human. That's just like, it's just difficult, right? But it's ours, right? So it's like move forward with intention, move forward with purpose, move forward with like a growth mindset, right? I think these are really important, like just life lessons, right? Whether it's in all this stuff works for your career. Have your strategy, have your chessboard, move it forward, take your hits when you need, move back, move forward, all those things, right? So anyway, I was doing this and I was like, oh yeah, like that's such a cool idea. Like I never thought of that. And then I was like, I wonder what like Chat GPT thinks. So I have had my phone here for this exact moment. So I put this in and it says, those commitments become your chessboard strategy. Self-awareness is your board vision. A growth mindset is your adaptability to change, and relationships are your powerful alliances. So I thought that was pretty cool, right? And yeah, so I would say like enjoy your game of chess and keep at it. I think I've already said, like, I think take risks, take lots of risks earlier, figure out how, if you're going to take a risk, to mitigate it. And don't spend too much time looking backwards, right? Like, the finish line is in the other direction.
Thank you. Now open up the floor to any Q&A.
We'll use the microphone because we do have some people online, so.
Thank you all for being such a fabulous panel here. And also, I've been going through my career transition right now, and sometimes I might fall into the situation that I realize if whether you succeed or not is not huge on how much effort that you put into the work, and this just make me really frustrated. And I just realized the hard work is only put me in the station that I can compete with other candidates, but not secure a position in industry. So I'm wondering if you have ever experienced such situation, and how would you handle and digest that frustration and regain the confidence and keep going?
I'd say that I've been in exactly the same situation, but there was a time in South Africa where the job market changed a lot. And that's when I started using my network. So we're going back to relationships and network, and specifically in Vancouver, Canada, BC, across people that I've worked with, there's a lot of value in networks. Because it may not be that specific person that you know, but they know of opportunities that aren't necessarily on job boards and the places where you would assume that you would find. It's really, I go back to sort of volunteer, you never know who you're going to be introduced to other opportunities that may come about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel your pain, right? Like, I think like I'm a person who's like, yeah, I'm gonna work hard, right? And I'm a hard worker, do all the right things, you know, the metrics, like you're winning, go out to the market. No one wants to give you the time of day. It's crazy. Right? It is a pretty tricky environment. When I actually graduated Northeastern, there was like an economic downturn, and it was pretty difficult to go find a job, right? So sometimes there's a couple of things. One, maybe change your approach. I don't know what it is, but and I'm not saying like don't stop what you're doing, but sometimes a different approach. In North America, it's like very reasonable and acceptable just to start calling the companies you want to work for and just start reaching out and directly going after people via LinkedIn who you want to go work with, right? Like it isn't the traditional method. Like you don't need to wait for companies to open up slots or, just go. I'm not sure what's your background? What's your
So I was once worked in an auditing firm and now in here as a student.
Yeah. So, I think it's like there's really creative ways to get your name to the top of the list. Build something for somebody, solve something for somebody. So that's one way. I'd say maybe try a different tact. As opposed to be like, who do I want to work for in town? Who have I heard great things about? Who should I reach out to? How do I get in there? Look on LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, Synthia knows like who that person. I was at this event. I'm gonna, link in with her and see if she can introduce me. Stuff like that. Like you just have to go for it, right? And when you get a chance to be in an interview, you have to sell yourself, right? This is the difference between one of the things I think I did was I worked so hard that I just assumed that people would be like, you're working hard. I'm going to give you a raise. I'm going to give you this promotion. It doesn't work that way. Like, and like, you gotta just go and tell people why you're great. Like you gotta go and ask for jobs, right? And that's, I don't know if aggressive is, you just have to be assertive. Like you don't need to be a jerk about it. Like that's not the way it works. You have to be assertive. And if those things don't work, then maybe take a step back and think about, like, okay, I'm on step 3. What if I took this job over here that could lead me to that, right? Maybe it's about getting into a company and then moving horizontally, right? Instead of vertically. There's just really start thinking about it differently and maybe come up with 1 or 2 other tactics.
Informational interviews. That's another way of actually just getting to speak to somebody in the organization that you might be targeting to, first of all, learn more about their culture, show interest, and that may be a good way for you to get feedback on what you should be putting in that application next. Sometimes people say no to them, but it's worth asking. If you don't ask, you never.
Thanks so much for sharing today. So I have a question about when you are moving toward like a managerial and executive role, what kind of approaches or strategies you guys have made to maintain your network? Because currently for me, I'm just like sending annual greetings to my previous professor and my teammates back in my first job to say like, thank you for them. and that's how I maintain my network. But I just don't not sure like moving forward if I want to like do that in a corporate enterprise. Are there anything else that I should like do or be focused on to grow my network? Then, or just express my thankfulness for those people who have helped me.
Is your network locally here or like in across the world?
Across the world.
Okay, so it's a little bit more difficult to say, let's have a cup of coffee.
But that's something I do also like if I travel, for example, I travel here Vancouver, I know someone I worked before or like went to school before, I would like ask what do you guys want to hang out? That's what I do so far.
Well, good. So you're already doing some of the things. If you're on LinkedIn, sometimes send them a little message on a post that's very specific to them. Because that's a way that they'll see it. And it's just another connection point. We've updated.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm hearing what you said is like, what would be really good ways to stay connected and engaged? I would think about it in, okay, you know, I've got this problem that you're not at, or this challenge at work, or, you know, problem that you're trying to solve. When you have those, go call your network then and be like, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem, or I created this thing. What do you think of it? Right. And like, then you go to those people who have these great minds that you were so impressed with, and you get them to work, right? You get them to work for you, right? There's this like, and they're excited to do that. Like, you know, it's like, it's actually probably easier to be like, yeah, let's work on this problem. And how are you? How's it going? You know, what did you do last week? It's like, hey, I've got this thing that I'm working on, right? Or, hey, you know, I'm trying to figure out, I'm having a struggling here. Like, here's what I'm doing today. Could you guys help me think about 2 or 3 other ways that I can tackle this? You go out to your network and, you know, like, so make them work for you, right? And they're likely in your network because they all have growth mindsets and they know what it's like. So I would encourage like a deeper level of engagement and a smaller group of a network, right? Just, yeah, I mean, that's just generally make them work for you, because then they're going to call you and be like, hey, like, can you help me work through this problem or challenge? Right. And you'll be like, yeah, absolutely. And then you might learn something for that. So, you know, use those as opportunities to go a bit deeper with your network. And if you don't have a person in your network that can help you solve that problem, then go find someone and say, hey, I was curious if I could get 20 minutes of your time to help me solve this problem. Would you be up for working on that with me? Then you can start to extend your network very, like, in a very, what's the word, like a very natural, yeah, like about like strategic way, right? So.
You guys, oh, hi, can you hear me? Thank you guys for that insightful talk. Just a quick question in terms of the challenges that you've had in your life, whether it's personal or work-wise. What was the favorite one that made an impact and change a pivot into your career?
A challenge that made the pivot. Yeah.
It's good that you don't have any.
No, I have many. Exactly. What can I share? You want to go first?
I can think I'll frame it as a challenge, but it's something that I really wanted. It was in the work setting. The context was I was VP of operations for Western Canada at Colliers. And we were starting to nationalize the organization. The person in Eastern Canada had announced their retirement. But I walked up to the president of brokerage one day. This was actually in a really weird setting because we were at Harvard at a leadership course in the days where I had the privilege of going to Harvard with colleagues. And what have I got to lose? But I was terrified doing it. And I said to him, I'd like to take on the national role. Give me 4 months. I think he was so shocked. He had no idea how to answer. So he said yes. And I never looked back.
Yeah, I'll some context on this one. So one of my, I think, greatest career journeys was with a company that I was with for like 10 years. And the reason I stayed so long is that they grew so aggressively. And they moved through like a startup to a growth company to going public, right? And so it felt like almost like I was like getting my MBA at this company. I had like so many different roles. I was learning, but I put my like heart and soul into that company. You know, it moved, like I said, from a startup all the way up. And when the company got so big that it was preparing to go public, they brought in all these outside people. And that was really challenging for me because one, I had spent majority of my career at this company. You know, I had been somewhere else like 10 years before that, but the majority of my tech career, I would say, at this company. And I was really tricky for me. I was just like, wow, right? And it was like they were speaking this different language, right? Like, it's like very political, you know, language. They were saying all these things, but I was like, you're not saying anything, right? And so I was very challenged, emotional, frustrated. And then they moved me out of my position and put me into this sort of side position, right? And it wasn't good. Like I was very unhappy. Like my friends were like, what is wrong with you? And I was very resistant against the transition. And because I was emotional around it, and that's okay. But anyway, long story short, like, you know, the writing was on the wall and I could have stayed there and just done some job that I didn't really want to do. And been sort of, I guess, resigned myself to it. But I didn't want to do that. So yeah, that was a huge challenge, but then sort of kicked me in the butt to leave. And then I left and then I went and started a couple of my own startups, right? So sometimes things happen. I think Brene Brown calls them like sliding doors. Like, you know, it's like that door is in front of you and you can either step through it or you don't. And so that was probably one of the biggest career challenges, but kind of, you know, I look back now and I think, oh my God, thank God that happened, right? But at that time I was like, right. So yeah.
One more. Is there another question, Emer?
Thank you for this amazing sharing. So my question is about career change. So basically, I was an auditor in the accounting firm like her, and I am a second master's allied student in computer science program in Northeastern University. So why I want to like make this career change because I didn't like what I did before, like accounting and stuff. So but the thing is that I need to leverage this experience to stand out compared to other like computer science students. So my question is that although I did not like my previous job, that's why I want to change, but I still need to combine them. So how do I?
You may have hated it, but you learned lots of lessons and transferable skills. So in my time of auditing, I certainly learned about how things shouldn't be done and what good looks like. And I'm sure you would have had some of those experiences. That's transferable skills in the context that you can probably frame your computer science work that you're doing now to solve problems differently. To add a little bit more information, it's hard for me to give you some specific examples in your context and chat about it afterwards, but focus on those things. Because you may not think that it's a transferable skill naturally because that's sort of where you come from. And it's like you live in your body, you don't necessarily see what other people see. Chat to someone else and they may give you a couple of clues as to what you can do in tweaking your resume or your cover letter, however you're going about it, or examples you can use in your interview that transfers very well.
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest risks for people who are leaders are in a position of hiring. The biggest risks is you can look at somebody's background and assess them that they have the right job skills, like the specific skills for that role, like they can code or they know accounting. What is really hard to assess for is their ability to actually execute and be accountable for a role, right? And you already have that. You can show that. You can you can create confidence in that where you are, you're reliable. You've been in a position where you've had deliverables, you have delivered them, you delivered them on time, right? You can show these things, and that's really important. So, because like having the skill set is only one aspect of being able to actually deliver on that. It's right. It's being able to block your time, do what you say you're going to do. Like you have so I would use that as real experience to show them that you're a really, really strong candidate. Like this isn't your first, rodeo with taking on a job. This is certainly a different skill set, but we can also talk about those skills. But you're also a proven, right, and reliable candidate, and that's you have to set yourself out. You have to show that you are different than others and lower risk. Okay? So again, you've got to be able to sell yourself. Right? I think that's really critical. Any other questions? Maybe last question. Amazing. One more. Are we okay on time? Sorry. Want to confirm. One last question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have the question I'm really curious about, because just like Synthia mentioned, I recently have been the volunteer for one non-profit, and also I do the study there. So I get a lot of connection with like different leaders from other non-profits, and when I go through their linking and also go through your linking, I find that like all these leaders, they get like multiple roles at the same time. I'm really curious about it. How can you do that? It's really like how can you do this time management? Because now I do the volunteer. Also, I do another remote job for my friend's company, and also I do the study here. I feel like it's really hard work for me. So yeah, I'm really curious about this, because that's like most of the leaders, they have multiple roles.
Priorities. I also have the fortune of having a good partner at home that takes care of things. And I've had to learn in life to ask for help on the personal front as well. So if you don't have that, there will be somebody in your life that can help you with that. But it goes back to priorities and what fills your cup. I got recently asked to sit on another board, and I showed up at the very first board meeting and found out that that was something that I actually really didn't want to. It was not the best use of my time. It's a good cause. It's a really good thing. But I had to say no. And that's sometimes the toughest thing to do, especially when you pull in many, many different directions. Prioritize, learn to say no, and make time for yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all those things. I don't necessarily know if that's like a good thing that you're saying when you know you're like, here's all these people, they have all these different roles. Like it works for some and it doesn't work for others, right? I think like part of growing your career, especially, you know, for someone like you and I, like there's times in your career where you have to stretch yourself. And there's times when have put in the years and years of experience where you're like, okay, what's next? Because again, remember we talked about vision and thinking, forward thinking. Okay, well, I have my full-time role here now. I am, you know, the CEO, COO. What's next after this? Do I want to, you know, how much longer do I want to do this? And when do I want to maybe start building out like my board experience, if that's something that's interesting? So I guess what I'm getting at is like, if you like doing a whole bunch of things, do it. If you are doing things, make sure it's intentional and you're doing it for a reason. Because there are times where you do have to handle 2 or 3 different scenarios, like, you know, have your full-time job, work a board role, have your full-time job. You know, this year I really want to give back, right? So that's important to me. So this year I'm going to work my full-time job, but I'm going to make space to give back. And the next year comes, you have to really ask yourself, do you want to give back again? Are you as passionate about that as you were last year? Or are you good for now? Right? Because again, I will go back to doing the wheel, and even if you don't sit down and do it, you got to think about things because there's only so much time. And if you do too much, you say yes to everything, and you don't say no, you will burn yourself out. And that's not going to be good for you, your friends, your family, your career, all those things. So, yeah, like it's really like a personal thing. If you want to do 5 things, then you can do 5 things. But it's not like you don't have to. So I don't know if that like helps, but I think that's like part of it is like when people start to transition and think about what's next, they will take on multiple roles. But I think it all comes down to what Synthia said around prioritization and even reevaluating. Why am I doing this? Is it filling your cup or are you just like, ugh, it's dragging me down, right?
And it depends on the time of your life. I mean, when the kids were in school with activities, there was no way I could take on the extra.
Yeah, definitely, right? Like, again, just watching your life, thinking about what's going on. It's a long life. There's lots of time to do a lot of different things. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I get the job of thanking our audience, but most of all, I think it's quite common to find ourselves getting our best leadership lessons directly from people with leadership, and because their stories come so purely and from the heart and from grit and determination, and something at a Northeastern we call experience, and they were really good lessons learned. Thank you for sharing them so much, and to Felicia, to Synthia, and as always, the exceptional moderation from my friend Jennica. Will you put your hands together and just give a round of applause?